All right, hi everyone. Welcome back to Making Multifamily Money. So today I have a guest, Michelle No. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Hey, excited that we can connect. I know you presented at SARCon and you're on the 0 to 100 panel. So just wanted to really have a conversation and get to learn more about your real estate journey. So without further ado, please let us know.
Thank you. I'm honored to be on this podcast and to share my story. And I'm taking this time to be an open book. So whatever questions you have for me, let me know.
Yeah. So kind of start, what got you into real estate and how'd you kind of scale?
Yeah. So my story is interesting where I come from a real estate investing family. My family are immigrants from China, and they have, always valued real estate. So I grew up in the Chinatown area of San Francisco, and we bought multifamily properties there. And my family and all of our immediate family lived in one apartment complex. Each one of us had different apartments. And so I kind of grew up like in the multifamily space and saw how they operated. And they were very um, Asian in the approach of how they went about managing properties. So everything was budget. They went under the table with cash. They were using like friends and family to help manage their properties. There was a lot of things that were not run or operated like a normal business. And I saw them, I would go around with my dad and we would go and clean apartments together or fix things, we would fix plumbing, fix clogged toilets. In San Francisco, there was already homeless, back like 30 years ago. So if a homeless broke into the basement and used the bathroom in our basement, then we would have to clean that up. So my view of real estate management was very negative. I didn't like it. I saw that they were constantly stressed out, complaining a lot about tenant drama and people not paying rent and all kinds of things. And I wanted to have nothing to do with it. So I actually made it a point when I, started going to school and developed my career that I was like, I'm staying far away from business. I'm not business, from real estate. I'm just going to invest in stocks and not even touch anything real estate related because I just saw like how it really kind of damaged my family. It was so stressful for them. So fast forward, it was around the time I was turning 21, just started going out a lot. And my boyfriend, now my husband, him and I at the time were going out in San Francisco. We would go out with our friends and come back to our San Francisco apartment and stay over before driving back the next morning, San Jose, so we could be safe after a night of going out. One night we came home, it was 2 a.m, and I find a foreclosure auction notice on our apartment. And then I'm like, what is going on? What is this? What does this mean? And it said like 3 weeks from now, you're going to auction, blah, 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 if you don't pay up. And that's when my whole world changed because I realized like we were not well financially. Um, so what was happening behind the scenes is my mom, she's kind of the businesswoman and the one to carry on the family legacy. She started to develop a severe mental illness when I was 5. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And so I knew that things were not going well for her, but I had no idea the status of our business. And especially growing up in our Chinese family, it's something that we just don't talk about. We didn't talk about finances. They never share with me what was happening behind the scenes. And my father, who's an immigrant from Hong Kong, he never went to college, and he just tried his best to take care of everything because he felt like it was his duty. And what happened is that by him shouldering the whole burden and trying to protect me, he didn't share with anybody what was happening, that we were in deep financial trouble, that we had 3 foreclosures, that we had debt collectors, we had people suing us. There was a whole slew of things. So I started to get involved at that age, right around the time that I was getting my career started, and help them to turn everything around. It took many, many years. And we had about 20 years of back taxes that we had to clean up and submit, and it was so much work. Luckily, I was studying business at the time. I was trying to start my career in tech and accounting and finance, and so it worked out well that I did have at least somewhat of a business background to support them. And even then, going through that whole thing with my family, I was like, I hate real estate. This sucks. I want nothing to do with it. Like, people are suing us, and we almost lost our home, and all these, just still more things happening in my life that proved to me that real estate was not a good idea. So it wasn't until I started really living out my life, having a great career. I went into tech. I worked at really great companies that helped further my career, like Oracle and Workday and Hitachi, and just kind of really was like snowballing with my career there. And then my husband and I bought a house, and we were family planning, and we were talking about our wedding and all this other stuff. And then we got to this point where we were like, what is the purpose of all this? And we didn't know how to label it at the time, but it was the rat race that we realized we were going around in a circle, just checking off all the check boxes of like, what is the purpose? How come we did all the things that we were supposed to do, but we didn't feel like we were living a life of purpose or contributing or helping people? And so we started to kind of dig deep on like what would be a purposeful life. And this was as we were nearing 30 and kind of had like I call it a 30 life crisis. So we're just like, kind of nearing that age where it's like, what is the meaning of all this stuff that we're doing, and why are we doing it? And why are we even like working? Like, what is the meaning of money? we had so many like existential questions. So we got really deep over like many nights of like bottles of wine and just kind of like laid it all out. We were like, what would we want to do? And it ended up being, we want to have lifestyle freedom. We want to be able to travel. We want to be able to volunteer all day long and not worry about our paycheck and our mortgage and where like be reliant on somebody else to pay us so that we could live. And so we started to talk about like what that would look like, because for me, it was mental health because of what happened to my mom, and just seeing how it really broke my family and broke everybody in our immediate family. We were all hugely affected by her illness, that I was like, I want to start a nonprofit. I want to volunteer all day and not worry about where I'm going to get my next paycheck, and have to like go do this job daily. So we started talking about passive income, and then we were like, how do you get passive income? And we were just kind of like Googling like passive income. What does that mean? How do you replace your paycheck? Like, just kind of really started that journey. And then we got into BiggerPockets, started reading a bunch of books, watched a bunch of webinars, and started going to some seminars, and really got into the idea of like, oh, you can create passive income from real estate. It never even occurred to me, because I never, like, my worldview of real estate was so just one, focus, that it never occurred to me what could happen if you managed it differently, if you actually were organized and protected yourself and operated like a business, and you could have lifestyle freedom. Never occurred to me. And then it wasn't until I went to a health expo, and there's a real estate guy talking, and he's like, I bought a building for every bill. And that stuck with me. It was like a light bulb moment. I was like, building for every bill. What does that even mean? And he was explaining how he's a police officer in Chicago and he like loves his job, but they don't pay him enough to support him and his family. He wanted to continue to being a police officer, but then he started thinking about how can he replace all of his expenses with passive income and cash flow. And he realized like getting a building for every bill that he had would create financial freedom for him. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into real estate, was just realizing like, wait a second, there's another way. And then as I started to deep dive into it more and more, then I started to recognize like, oh, all the things I have been doing for my family, all the cleanup of the foreclosures and working with attorneys and figuring out, mortgage stuff, and even my business background in accounting and finance and software has kind of led me up to the point where like I actually do have the skill sets required to be a real estate investor. So yeah, that's kind of how I started my real estate journey.
Wow, what a story. It's kind of funny how you went full circle. You went from, I guess most people, most like my family, we didn't start off in real estate, and that's the typical story, but it's kind of interesting to hear that your family is all real estate, but even despite that, you're so averted towards it. And it's funny, I always wonder about my future kids, like, are they just going to hate real estate too and then want to do nothing with it? But it's funny how you ended up going back to it once you discovered that, there's potential for passive income, there's potential for lifestyle freedom. And like you said, you could buy a building for every bill that you own. So it's kind of funny how you start off hating it, not knowing what it really was. You just kind of were exposed, then having to take over and manage it, hating it, to be honest, and then rediscovering that, oh, wait, real estate is actually pretty good, but you have to run it the right way as a business. So a lot of things I kind of want to dive in here. So I guess kind of going back to kind of your childhood, like, do you know why your parents got into real estate in the first place? Like, did they ever kind of share that with you?
I think it's just something that we understand kind of in our culture, especially with Chinese people. And I'm hearing from a lot of other Chinese people, especially like, growing up in the Chinatown area, like that is how you create wealth, is you buy property. And you see it a lot, a lot of real estate is owned by Chinese people, either Chinese Americans or people from China. So I think that is just sort of the unsaid like cultural understanding of like how to build wealth is through real estate. But I think what they didn't do that we have now is like, we have resources on the internet, and we have coaching and we have books. They didn't have any of that. So they tried their best to run these properties with no business background or no understanding of how to be an entrepreneur, how to manage people, how to manage the properties efficiently. So yeah, I think that's why they got into it in the first place. But I mean, just like I remember they were like doing rent rolls, and it was all like on a notepad. They were doing everything on pieces of paper. I remember like they were like collecting checks and like, writing down like each amount and who submitted the check and what day. And I think back to that and I'm like, can you imagine if you had like 100 units and you had to sit there and write down every single rent check that you got in a month? Like I could not imagine. And can you imagine like how error prone that system would be?
Yep, that's how you can cheat on the taxes a little bit, right?
Yeah, right. Like
all cash and go to the bank.
Zero.
Hide the cash under the mattress.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. No, so it's kind of funny you shared that because we're so fortunate in this day and age where there's a lot of information out there where you can have zero exposure to real estate and just pop online on YouTube and search it or Google it. Yeah. But yes, back in our parents' time, Like it was just kind of who your friends were, who your community was. And to your parents, in a good or bad way, depending how you take it, they're surrounded by people who just made it seem normal to own real estate, right? Like everyone, that was just the thing to do. You own real estate. You know, I'm assuming a lot of people own some type of business, whether it's a store, a restaurant, and then whatever money they make from that, they pump into real estate. So they at least were around that type of people where it was just more normalized, right? Like for me, I didn't think of buying apartment complexes was normal until I joined a group and everyone was buying apartments. Then I just felt out of place that I wasn't buying apartments. But before that, I was like, oh, only the rich people buy apartments. It's not for someone like me.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting how, you know, despite the lack of resources, just having surrounding themselves with the right people, you know, obviously they're probably copying the way they're running the business because that's how everyone ran it. And the funny thing is, what you described earlier was you were house hacking essentially your apartment complex. You basically own an apartment, your family owned an apartment complex, and you would live in a couple of units and then rent out the other units, which was what we call house hacking today, right?
Yeah.
So that's crazy how you did that. But you know, kind of one thing I wanted to dive into is, you know, as you mentioned, everything, they didn't run it like a business. They just kind of like, I assume a lot of it was their day job. Yeah, a lot of friends, a lot of family that were just kind of helping you out, and maybe you pay them to fix things here and there. Like, how'd you kind of change that once you kind of took over? Like, was there something you did immediately, or were you just kind of continuing the process?
So for their properties, I was very intentional at not doing it on their behalf. So I actually found a fund manager eventually to manage their properties for them, which was a blessing because it would have, I still wanted to further in my tech career. So that I was like, okay, I still want to, you know, keep going with this career. I don't have time to manage these properties. Let me just find a manager to help us out. So that was a blessing because I kind of got to see how they managed properties and how efficient they were, read the reports, and kind of saw like what it would take if you did have a structured way of managing properties and P&Ls and all those details, the tax return. So for me personally, in my approach, I went about it with doing a lot of coaching, investing a lot in myself, to learn from people that have done it correctly and have systems. And my very first coaching investment, it was like the biggest investment I've ever made in myself. It was 50 grand for coaching. And I was like, I saw that the value because they were giving me all their systems, even down to like their marketing materials, creating videos for us, you know, all the things helped us, you know, set up our LLC. It was so valuable to do that. But at the same time, you know, people around us were like, you're crazy. Why would you spend that kind of money? How do you even know it's going to work? Right. So it takes a lot of faith too, in investing that much money in yourself and just that this will pay off. There were times where I questioned, like, is this really working? Do I know what I'm doing? Is this going to pay off in the end? And I also see, you know, in that program, there were people that had a good amount of money. Let's say, you know, they were older, they were maybe like a dentist or a lawyer, and they spent the 50 grand. It wasn't a lot of money to them. And they just expected to learn how to invest in real estate by not putting in a lot of effort. And then in the end, like they had no properties, like they had no deals because they didn't take it seriously. Whereas for me, it was so much money that I squeezed every drop I could out of the coaching. I was like, I need to like rewatch our coaching calls. I need to do all of the course material. I need to put in all the work. I was really putting in that effort because it felt like so much money and I had to make it back. Like there was no option for me to not make it back. And because of that, I think like I scaled so fast and I actually made that 50K back in like 6 months. So it was great. Like I was like, wow, I flipped, you know, a couple houses. It was a flipping coaching program, and flipped a couple houses. The first one lost money on, the next two made money on, and then made the 50 back within the 6 month period of our coaching. And so I'm like, so if you if you told somebody like, oh, if you invest 50K, but you'll make it back in 6 months and you have all the knowledge to continue on exponentially, wouldn't that be a great deal? So since then, I've been like a huge proponent of coaching, investing in myself. I'm also a coach myself for Zen Coast University. We help students with passive income. And so, just like from my personal experience of doing it, that's given me the confidence to really share with other people like, hey, like it's worthwhile if you invest in yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that story because, I'm pretty big on, coaching, mentoring as well. I joined a mentorship program, specializing in apartment complex. It wasn't 50,000, it was only 15K, but it's still a pretty penny, right? And
Yeah.
what I kind of tell people is, honestly, what's beautiful about real estate is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's been around for centuries. It will continue to be around for centuries. And for the most part, the concepts are very easy, right? You want to buy right, add value, and then know your exit strategy, whether you're flipping it, doing a cash out refinance, or just holding it, right? So,
Right.
and then for that, as you mentioned, but the people and all the information now, it's honestly free. I would say the only difference between coaching and mentorship is it's just a little more structured. You have someone there that's kind of like a step ahead of you and kind of guide you through those pitfalls. My mentorship that I joined, like I kind of wish they were more involved in that aspect. Like I kind of just learned a lot on my own. And then I just started sharing my own journey, my own mistakes on like YouTube, because I just felt like no one was really doing that. And kind of another piece I wanted to hit on was, like when you invest money into something, you take it way more seriously. Like the fact that you put 50K into it, it was probably like at the time, all your savings. And for you, it was, I need to learn how to do this. And because of that, you became probably coachable. You consumed the material fast. You took consistent action. And I was the same way. Like, I was just like, okay, if you tell me to write 5 offers a week, I'm going to write 5 offers a week at least.
Yeah.
If you tell me to send mailers out, I'll send mailers out. And like on my first deal, I made 250K equity day one, buying an apartment complex off market. So, I mean, I spent 15K, I made 250K off my first apartment complex, right?
That's
so
amazing.
So I really like how you do that, but I kind of want to preface that if you don't have the money, everyone is fortunate to be able to spend that money. But, free information is good out there. You just have to, make sure that you follow people who are actually doing it and are willing to teach. So there's ways to get it for free, but from my experience, you take it a lot more seriously when you have skin in the game, which unfortunately means that you're going to have to put some money down. Because if you give someone the same information for free versus if you paid like 50K for that information, your level of commitment is going to vary significantly. Because when it's free, you take it for granted, unfortunately. So,
sure.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, great for sharing that. And I kind of glazed over it a bit, but so let's go back to that foreclosure on your apartment complex.
Yeah.
So how did you handle that situation and how did it end up?
So my dad went to the court and found out that if he declared bankruptcy, they would pause the foreclosure. And so he went in to the auction and waved his papers and was like, we're declaring bankruptcy. And then they had to pause the foreclosure. And it's interesting. I don't even know how he came up on that news. I think he was talking to an attorney about it. And that was a great thing because I had no idea how we were going to save it. It was only 3 weeks away. It was, and for me, just trying to get the information from my dad was like an uphill battle. He was still holding on to it so closely that there were times where I had to pry papers out of his hands. And I started my detective work waiting for him to leave the house before I went into his room and looked through his files to get information. I mean, that's how difficult it was to get started on finding information about like what was happening, who's the debt collectors, how many foreclosures, all this stuff. And then what ended up being kind of a blessing in disguise was that we lost one of the properties to foreclosure. Not the one that we were living in, luckily, but another property. And, most people would say that's very unfortunate because obviously you're not going to get the value of what the property is through foreclosure. But it ended up being a blessing because we had no money and we couldn't even pay off our attorneys. We couldn't pay off accountants, nothing. And so having the building go through foreclosure at least put a little bit of money into our bank so that we could hire attorneys and hire all the right people to help us. So in the end, I think when you look back at whatever is happening, it felt like my whole world was crashing. I literally one of the most stressful times of my life was trying to go through that because I felt immense pressure, especially because I'm an only child. That everything my family had worked for many generations, they came from China and worked, from my great grandmother all the way down to me, all the things that they had worked so hard for. And, my grandparents had already passed at that time, was disappearing within moments. It felt like I was all the things, generations of hard work and coming to America and their dream was slipping away by us losing all these properties in the portfolio. So there was such an immense pressure on me to turn it around and help them save these properties. And I look back now and I would have done things very differently. I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, when everything went down, I actually had to Google like foreclosure because I didn't even know what a foreclosure was and what the process is. I looked up some YouTubes. I'm like, what does it even mean to like get in foreclosure? And so I really started from ground zero with my education, but I think I am living proof that, you don't have to know everything to make a difference. And Google, YouTube, there's so much information out there. Like we live in a great age where the information is at your fingertips. So that served me well, is just being able to look up things and do my own research and learn as we went. And every time something new would happen, like what's a conservatorship? What does it mean to have the bank take over your property? Like I didn't know any of those things, and Google was amazing for that. And then including like the foreclosure, us losing one property to foreclosure was really a blessing in disguise.
Okay. Wow. That's, I can't even imagine. It's kind of funny when you mention your story. I was kind of just thinking about myself because I scaled rapidly in the past 8 months, but the downside of scaling rapidly, there's downsides too. And I'm pretty like transparent about it. When you scale too fast, you fall into something called asset rich, cash poor, right? And by you having to lose one property, you increase your cash. So that kind of helped you sustain your other properties. So sometimes it's kind of like taking a step back before you can take like 3 steps forward. You have to kind of lay that foundation with that. So I'm kind of going through that right now, where actually in the process of trying to sell my mobile home park for that reason, where I want to increase my cash position, stabilize my apartment units. And at that point, I can then leap forward and buy more if I want to. So, and I kind of love that point too. And it's kind of funny because when I interview people, success leaves clues. And basically every successful real estate investor goes to a point where I call it the valley of despair, where you feel like everything is ending, your world's falling apart. I can't even imagine how much pressure it is to like lose multiple generations worth of wealth. I guess I was fortunate where I didn't really have much to lose for me, but just that pressure. But the key message I got out of it was everything is figure outable, in simple terms. Like you can figure it out as long as you can problem solve one step at a time. You'll make mistakes, you learn from mistakes, and somehow you get through it. And that's exactly what you did well, and that's probably why you're successful today. So huge kudos for that. Not many 22-year-olds go through that type of stuff and are hit with that type